Why do I think Kit Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat became 80s icons? In a short phrase, I will say they knew who their public was, and it was not the elite. This was also part of the reason why some big critics didn't understand their work. Therefore, they weren't allowed to present on some of the biggest art galleries while they were alive and internationally famous. The topics they were talking about affected mainly underrepresented groups, such as the LGBTQ+ community and the Black community. And even though I cannot dare to assume that every highly respected art critic of the time was heterosexual or even white, I can say that respect and admiration amongst the elite was mainly given by and for men who were presumably cis, white, and straight. Although what I just say is not new information, it was important to establish because it explains the second part of the phrase, and it also highlights that we have a problem that we have still now, and that is the lack of representation of minorities in positions of power. And by minorities, I don't mean small groups of people. I mean large groups of people such as women, queer people, racialized people, etc., that have been historically treated as less valuable or with less respect than white heterosexual cis men. Now with the first part of the phrase. Why did they know their public? I think it was because they were the public. Haring's work is mainly recognized due to his focus on AIDS awareness and safe sex. He died of HIV. His Crack is Walk mural is also iconic. The story behind it is that he made it for a friend of his who was an addict to crack cocaine. And Basquiat was a black man in the US. In an interview about the painting Defacement, he says that the murdered man could have easily been him. I think that is also why so many people listen to them. First of all, they were some of the few famous people actively bringing the conversations to the mainstream media, mainly during the early 80s. And second of all, they were putting themselves as equals. It was not an I am painting what you are suffering, but I am painting what we are suffering. The government also failed to provide protection to these marginalized communities, and in fact re-victimized them through laws. We can identify this with the 1994 interview conducted by journalist Dan Boone with President Nixon's domestic policy chief, John Rickman, who was, quote, said, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities, we could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." And the consequences of the policies that the President Nixon's administration instaurated during his terms from 1969 to 1974 and later on President Reagan during the 80s are long-lasting, as we can see in these statistics. Haring and Basquiat also demonstrated that they knew their public through the places they were putting their work in, starting in city walls and blank spaces in the subway, then moving to famous clubs instead of art galleries, and in the case of Kit Haring, the pop shop, and his participation with MTV. As Haring said about the pop shop when he started facing critiques, "My work has started to become more expensive and more popular within the art market. Those prices meant that only people who could afford big art prices could have access to the work. The pop shop makes it accessible." Finally, they were a brand. In regarding its earlier work as Samo, Basquiat has said that it was a logo, and it showed it by placing the trademark symbol besides the signature, and even though some of the authors I read assumed he was joking, I think that it is true. Their works are easily recognizable, open to the public, and they even had signature symbols, the written baby in the case of Haring, and the crown for Basquiat, which made it easier for them to become mainstream.